Chapter 44. The elements will recombine. One day, Meghalaya spoke to the Buddha about Nanda's unhappiness as a monk. Nanda had confided in Meghalaya how much he missed his fiancée in Kapilavathi. Nanda said, "I still remember the day I carried the Buddha's bowl back to the Garuda Park. As I was leaving, Janapada Kalyani looked into my eyes and said, 'Hurry back, I will be waiting for you.' I can so clearly recall the sheen of her black hair as it brushes her slender shoulders. Her image often arises during my sitting meditation. Every time I see her in my mind, I am filled with longing. I'm not happy being a monk." The next afternoon, the Buddha invited Nanda to go for a walk with him. They left Jetavana and headed towards a distant hamlet located by a lake. They sat on a large boulder that overlooked the crystal clear water. A family of ducks swam by leisurely. Birds sang in the overhanging branches of the trees. The Buddha said, "Some of our brothers have told me that you are not happy living the life of a bhikkhu. Is that true?" Nanda was silent. After a moment, the Buddha asked, "Do you feel ready to return to Kapilavatthu and prepare to take over the throne?" Nanda replied hastily, No, I have already told everyone that I do not like politics. I know I don't have the ability to rule a kingdom. I do not wish to become the next king." "Then why are you unhappy being a bhikkhu?" Again Nanda was silent. "Do you miss Kalyani?" Nanda blushed, but he did not speak. The Buddha said, "Nanda, there are many young women here in Kosala, as beautiful as your Kalyani. Do you remember the reception we attended at King Pasenadi's palace? Did you notice any women there as pretty as Kalyani?" Nanda admitted, "Perhaps there are young women here as pretty as she is. But I care only for Kalyani. In this life, there is only one Kalyani." Nanda, attachment can be a great barrier to spiritual practice. The physical beauty of a woman's face is surely the beauty of a rose. You know that all things are impermanent. You must learn to penetrate the impermanent nature of things. Look, the Buddha pointed to an old woman leaning on a cane and hobbling across the bamboo bridge. Her face was covered with wrinkles. The old woman was surely once a beauty. Kalyani's beauty will also fade with the years. During that same time, your search for enlightenment could bring peace and joy for this life and for lives to come. Nanda, look at the two monkeys playing on that branch. You might not find the female attractive with her long pointed snout and red bottom, but to the male she is the most beautiful monkey on earth. To him she is unique, and he would sacrifice his very life to protect her. Can you see that?" Nanda interrupted the Buddha. "Please don't say anything more. I understand what you are trying to say. I will devote myself more wholeheartedly to my practice." The Buddha smiled at his young brother. "Pay special attention to observing your breath. Meditate on your body, feelings and mental formations, consciousness and objects of your consciousness. Look deeply in order to see the process of birth, growth, and fading of every phenomena from your own body, emotions, mind, and objects of mind. If there is anything you don't understand, come and ask me or Shariputra. Nanda, remember that the happiness liberation brings is true, unconditional happiness. It can never be destroyed. Aspire to that happiness. The sky was growing dark. The Buddha and Nanda stood and walked back to the monastery. Jetavana now hosted a strong and stable monastic life. The number of bhikkhus living there had risen to 500. The following year, the Buddha returned to Vesali for the retreat season. The Lichavi princes had transformed great forest into a monastery. They had built a 2-story Dharma hall with a roof, which they named Katagara. A number of smaller buildings were scattered throughout the forest of sal trees. The princes were the sponsors of the retreat season with generous contributions from Ambapala. Bhikkhus throughout Magadha and as far away as Sakya gathered to spend the retreat season there with the Buddha. They numbered 600 in all. Lay disciples travelled to spend the rainy season there as well, in order to receive the Buddha's teachings. They brought daily food offerings and attended all the Dharma talks. One morning in early autumn, just after the retreat came to a close, the Buddha received news that King Suddhodana was on his deathbed in Kapilavatthu. The king had sent Prince Mahanama, his nephew, as a messenger to summon the Buddha in hopes of seeing his son one last time. At Manahama's special request, the Buddha agreed to travel in the carriage in order to save time. Arundula, Nanda, Ananda, and Rahula accompanied him. They left so quickly that even the princes and Amapali were unable to see them off. After the carriage departed, 200 bhikkhus, including all the former princes of the Sakya clan, began to walk towards Kapilavatthu. They wanted to be with the Buddha at his father's funeral. The royal family met the Buddha at the palace gates. Mahapajapati led him at once into the king's chamber. The king's face, pale and wan, brightened when he saw the Buddha. The Buddha sat down by the bed and took the king's hand in his own. The king, now 80 years old, was thin and frail. The Buddha said, "Father, please breathe gently and slowly. Smile. Nothing is more important than your breath at this moment. Nanda, Ananda, Rahula, and Anarula and I will breathe together with you." The king looked at each of them. He smiled and began to follow his breath. No one dared cry. After a moment, the king looked at the Buddha and said, "I have seen clearly the impermanence of life and how if a person wants happiness, he should not lose himself in a life of desire. Happiness is obtained by living a life of simplicity and freedom." Queen Gautami told the Buddha, "These past months the king has lived very simply. He has truly followed your teachings. Your teaching has transformed the lives of every one of us here." Still holding the king's hand, the Buddha said, "Father, take a deep look at me, at Nanda and Rahula. Look at the green leaves on the branches outside your window. Life continues. As life continues, so do you. You will continue to live in me and Nanda and Rahula, and in all beings. The temporal body arises from the 4 elements, which dissolve only to endlessly recombine again. Father, don't think that because the body passes away, life and death can bind us. Rahula's body is also your body." The Buddha motioned to Rahula to come and hold the king's other hand. A lovely smile arose on the face of the dying king. He understood the Buddha's words and he no longer feared death. The king's advisors and ministers were all present. He motioned to them to approach and in a feeble voice said, "During my reign, I have doubtless upset and wronged you. Before I die, I must ask your forgiveness." The advisors and ministers could not hold back their tears. Prince Mahanama knelt by the bed and said, "Your Majesty, you have been the most virtuous and just of kings. No one here has any reason to fault you." Mahanama continued, "I humbly wish to suggest that Prince Nanda now leave monastic life and return to Kapilavatthu to ascend the throne. The people would all be happy to see your own son as king. I pledge to assist and support him with all my being." Nanda looked at the Buddha as if to plead for rescue. Queen Gautami also looked the Buddha's way. Quietly, the Buddha spoke. "Father, ministers, please allow me to share my insight in this matter. Nanda does not yet possess the inclination or ability to serve as a political ruler. He needs more years of spiritual practice to be ready for such a task. Rahula is only 15 years old and too young to become a king. I believe Prince Mahanama is the best qualified to be king. He is a man of great intelligence and talent, as well as a man of compassion and understanding. Furthermore, he has served as the king's chief advisor these past 6 years, on behalf of the royal family, on behalf of the people. I ask Prince Mahanama to accept this difficult responsibility." Mahanama joined his palms and protested, "I fear my talents fall far short of what is required for a king. Please, Your Majesty, Lord Buddha and ministers, choose someone more worthy than myself." The other ministers voiced their approval of the Buddha's suggestion. The king nodded his approval as well and called Mahanama to his side. He took Mahanama's hand and said, "Everyone places his trust in you. The Buddha himself has faith in you. You are my nephew, and I would be honored and happy to pass the throne on to you. You will continue our line for 100 generations." Mahanama bowed, submitting to the king's wishes. The king was overjoyed. "Now I can close my eyes in peace. I am happy to see the Buddha before I left this world. My heart is now without any cares whatsoever. I have no regrets or bitterness. I hope that the Buddha will rest in Kapilavatthu for the time in order to assist Mahanama in the first days of his reign. Your virtue, Lord Buddha, will assure our country 100 generations of peace." The king's voice faded to barely a whisper. The Buddha said, "I will remain here for whatever time is needed to help Mahanama." The king smiled weakly, but his eyes radiated peace. He closed his eyes and passed from this life. Queen Gautami and Yasodhara began to cry. The ministers sobbed in grief. The Buddha folded the king's hands on his chest and then motioned for everyone to stop crying. He told them to follow their breathing. After several moments, he suggested they meet in the outer chamber to discuss arrangements for the funeral. The funeral took place 7 days later. More than 1,000 Brahmins attended the ceremony. But King Siddhartha's funeral was made unique by the presence of 500 saffron-robed bhikkhus who represented the way of the Buddha. In addition to the traditional Brahmana prayers and recitations, sutras of the way were chanted. The bhikkhus chanted the Four Noble Truths, the Sutra on Impermanence, the Sutra on Fire, the Sutra on Dependent Co-arising, and the Three Refuges. They chanted in the tongue of Magahi, which was spoken by all the people east of the Ganga. The Buddha slowly circled the funeral pyre 3 times. Before he lit the funeral pyre, he said, "Birth, old age, sickness and death occur in the life of all persons. We should reflect on birth, old age, sickness and death every day in order to prevent ourselves from becoming lost in desire and in order to be able to create a life filled with peace, joy and contentment. A person who has attained the way looks on birth, old age, sickness and death with equanimity. The true nature of all dharmas is that there is neither birth nor death, neither production nor destruction, neither increasing nor decreasing. Once lit, the flames consumed the pyre. The sound of gongs and drums intertwined with chanting. The people of Kapilavathi attended in great numbers to see the Buddha light the king's funeral pyre. After Mahanama's coronation, the Buddha remained in Kapilavathi for 3 months. One day, Mahapajapati Gautami visited him in Nigroga Park. She offered a number of robes and also requested to be ordained as a nun. She said, "If you will allow women to be ordained, many will benefit. Among our clan, many princes have left home to become your disciples. Many of them had wives. Now their wives desire to study the Dharma as nuns. I want to be ordained myself. It would bring me great joy. This has been my sole desire since the king died." The Buddha was silent for a long moment before he said, "It is not possible." Lady Pajapati pleaded, "I know this is a difficult issue for you. If you accept women into the Sangha, you will be met with protests and resistance from society. But I do not believe you are afraid of such reactions." Again, the Buddha was silent. He said, "In Rajnagar, there are also a number of women who want to be ordained, but I don't believe it is the right time yet. Conditions are not yet right to accept women in the Sangha." Gautami pleaded 3 times with him, but his answer remained the same. Deeply disappointed, she departed. When she returned to the palace, she told Yasudhara of the Buddha's response. A few days later, the Buddha returned to Vesali. After his departure, Gautami gathered all the women who wished to be ordained. They included a number of young women who had never been married. All the women belonged to the Sakya clan. She told them, "I know beyond a doubt that in the way of awakening, all people are equal. Everyone has the capacity to be enlightened and liberated. The Buddha has said so himself. He has accepted untouchables into the Sangha. There is no reason he should not accept women. We are full persons too. We can attain enlightenment and liberation. There is no reason to regard women as inferior. I suggest we shave our heads, get rid of our fine clothes and jewels, put on the yellow robes of a bhikkhu, and walk barefoot to Vesali, where we will ask to be ordained. In this way, we will prove to the Buddha and everyone else that we are capable of living simply and practicing the way. We will walk hundreds of miles and beg for our food. This is the only hope we have to be accepted into the Sangha. All the women agreed with Gautami. They saw in her a true leader. Yasodhara smiled. She had long appreciated Gautami's strong will. Gautami was not to be stopped by any obstacle. As proved by her years of working on behalf of the poor with Yasodhara, the woman agreed on a day to put their plans into action. Gautami said to Yasodhara, "Gopa, it would be best if you didn't come with us this time. Things may go more smoothly. When we have succeeded, there will be plenty of time for you to follow." Yasodhara smiled in understanding. Chapter 45. Opening the door. Early one morning, on his way to the lake to get some water, Nanda met Gautami and 50 other women standing not far from the Buddha's hut. Every woman had shaved her head and was wearing a yellow robe. Their feet were swollen and bloody. At first glance, Nanda thought it was a delegation of monks. But suddenly he recognized Lady Gautami. Hardly able to believe his eyes, he blurted, "Good heavens, Lady Gautami, where have you come from? Why are your feet so bloody? Why have you and all the ladies come here like this?" Gautami answered, "Venerable Anandi, we have shaved our heads and given away all our fine clothes and jewels. We no longer have any possessions in the world. We left Kapilavatthu and have walked for 15 days, sleeping by the roadside and begging for our food in small villages along the way. We wish to show that we are capable of living like bhikkhus. I beseech you, Nanda, please speak to the Buddha on our behalf. We wish to be ordained as nuns." Nanda said, "Wait here, I will speak with the Buddha at once. I promise to do all I can." Nanda entered the Buddha's hut just as the Buddha was putting on his robes. Nagita, the Buddha's assistant at that time, was also present. Nanda told the Buddha all he had just seen and heard. The Buddha did not say anything. Nanda then asked, "Lord, is it possible for a woman to attain the fruits of stream enterer, once returner, never returner, and arakship?" The Buddha answered, "Beyond a doubt." "Then why won't you accept women into the Sangha? Lady Gautami nurtured and cared for you from the time you were an infant. She has loved you like a son. Now she has shaved her head and renounced all her possessions. She has walked all the way from Kapilavatthu to prove that women can endure anything that men can. Please have compassion and allow her to be ordained." The Buddha was silent for a long moment. Then he asked Nagita to summon the Venerable Shariputra, Moggallana, Anuruddha, Baliika, Kimbila, and Mahakassapa. When they arrived, he discussed the situation with them at length. He explained that it was not discrimination against women which made him hesitate to ordain them. He was unsure how to open the Sangha to women without creating harmful conflict, both within and outside of the Sangha. After a lengthy exchange of ideas, Shariputra said, "It would be wise to create statutes which define the role of nuns within the Sangha. Such statutes would diminish public opposition, which is certain to erupt, since there has been discrimination against women for thousands of years. Please consider the following 8 rules. First, a nun or bhikkhuni will always defer to a bhikkhu, even if she is older or has practiced longer than he has. Second, all bhikkhunis must spend the retreat season at a centre within reach of a centre of bhikkhus in order to receive spiritual support and further study. Third, twice a month, the bhikkhunis should delegate someone to invite the bhikkhus to decide on a date for Apsatha, the special day of observance. The bhikkhu should visit the nuns, teach them and encourage them in their practice. Fourth, after the rainy season, the nuns must attend the Pavarana ceremony and present an account of their practice, not only before other nuns, but before the monks. Fifth, whenever a bhikkhuni breaks the practice, she must confess both before the bhikkhunis and the bhikkhus. Sixth, after a period of practice as a novice, a bhikkhuni will take full vows before the communities of both monks and nuns. Seventh, a bhikkhuni should not criticize or censor a bhikkhu. Eighth, a bhikkhuni will not give dharma instruction to a community of bhikkhus. Moggallana laughed. These 8 rules are clearly discriminatory. How can you pretend otherwise? Shariputra replied, the purpose of these rules is to open the door for women to join the Sangha. They are not intended to discriminate, but to help end discrimination. Don't you see? Moggallana nodded, acknowledging the merit of Shariputra's statement. Bahadiyya said, these 8 rules are necessary. Lady Gautami has commanded such authority. She is the Lord's mother. Without rules such as these, it would be difficult for anyone except the Buddha himself to guide her in her practice. The Buddha turned to Nanda. Nanda, please go and tell Lady Mahapajapati that if she is willing to accept these 8 special rules, she and the other women may be ordained. The sun had already climbed high into the sky. But Nanda found Lady Gautami and the other women patiently waiting. After hearing the 8 rules, Gautami was overjoyed. She replied, Venerable Nanda, please tell the Buddha that just as a young girl gladly accepts a garland of lotus flowers or roses to adorn her hair after washing it with perfumed water, I happily accept the 8 rules. I will follow them all my life if I am granted permission to be ordained. Ananda returned to the Buddha's hut and informed him of Lady Gautami's response. The other women looked at Gautami with concerns in their eyes, but she smiled and reassured them. Don't worry, my sisters. The important thing is that we have earned the right to be ordained. These 8 rules will not be barriers to our practice. They are the door by which we may enter the Sangha. All 51 women were ordained the same day. Venerable Shariputra arranged for them to live temporarily in Ampapali's mangrove grove. The Buddha also asked Shariputra to teach the nuns the basic practice. 8 days later, Bhikkhuni Mahapajapati paid a visit to the Buddha. She said, Lord, please show me compassion and explain how I may best make quick progress on the path of liberation. The Buddha answered, Bhikkhuni Mahapajapati, the most important thing is to take hold of your mind. Practice observing the breath and meditate on the body, feelings, mind, and objects of mind. Bhikkhuni Mahapajapati. Practicing like that, each day you will experience a deepening of humility, ease detachment, peace, and joy. When those qualities arise, you can be sure you are on the correct path, the path of awakening and enlightenment. Bhikkhuni Mahapajapati wanted to build a convent in Vesali in order to enable the nuns to draw close to the Buddha and his senior disciples. She also wanted later to return to Kapilavathi to open a convent in her homeland. She sent a message to Yasudhara to announce the good news of the woman's ordination. Bhikkhuni Gautami knew that the acceptance of women into the Sangha would create an uproar. Bitter opposition would undoubtedly result, and many people would condemn the Buddha and his Sangha. She knew the Buddha would have to face many difficulties. She was grateful and understood that the 8 rules were temporary, necessary to protect the Sangha from harmful conflict. She was sure that later on, once the ordination of women was an established fact, the 8 rules would no longer be necessary. The Buddha's community now had 4 streams: the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upsakas, male lay disciples, and upasakas, female lay disciples. Bhikkhuni Mahapajapati gave careful thought as to how the bhikkhunis should dress. Her suggestions were all accepted by the Buddha. The bhikkhus wore 3 garments: the anti-vachasaka or pants, the atra sanga or inner robe, the sangati or outer robe. In addition to these 3 garments, the bhikkhunis added a cloth wrapped around the chest called a samkasika and a skirt called a kasalaka. In addition to their robes and begging bowls, each monk and nun also had the right to own a fan, a water filter, a needle and thread to mend their robes, a pick to clean their teeth, and a razor to shave their heads twice a month.